golden knob. Jeff Graham printed this on a 3D printer, and I rattle canned this with myself, and Nathan Hahn did some finishing work on it, and yeah, and this is, we made this ourselves. If anyone would like to take photos, now would be, well, we can do photos later. Yeah, let's do photos later, okay.
I think you get it up a little bit there. Thank you. Okay, guys and gals. That's fine. I'm amazed, just amazed to be here. I went through the exhibits and it's just mind-boggling. And Eric, thank you so much. When you called, I was so blown away and surprised because, well, you can imagine. At any rate, let me just, you put up with me for a little while here because I'm 88 and I'm very, very touched. I'm gonna come unglued here in a minute, so let's not do that. As Eric mentioned, my main claim to fame are those 2 country music records, and I'm going to tell you how those came about because it was a combination of place and people. Now, most of you have probably never heard Country Moog and then the follow-up record, Nashville Gold. So if you would, I think we'll play one cut from the second album, which is indicative. Can we play, I think it's Poke Salad Annie. Moog 3C. I did that in, I think, 1969. It was released in 1970 in Nashville, Tennessee. What I'm going to go into now is how this came to be. Because, as all of you know, one person alone in this business is never enough. It's got to be the producer with the ideas, the direction. It's got to be the artist, and there's got to be the promotion, the label, the distribution. As all of you know, the distribution is the killer of so many things to get distribution. The way this happened is if you don't mind, I'll be reading a bit here. In 1964, I joined the faculty of the School of Music, Peabody College for Teachers in Nashville, Tennessee. It was a very old school. It had been set up after the Civil War, for that matter. I joined the faculty and taught music theory, music composition, and directed the university orchestra. Soon after I got there, I established my own little studio in my office. Now, in those days, everything was tape. This is, of course, it was extremely primitive. Nevertheless, there were, well, at any rate, what I had in that office was 2 tape recorders, an Ampex that owned a half track, 7.5 inches per second. I believe it was a Roberts, which had 3 speeds, but it was a quarter track, so you can imagine the amount of noise that was in this operation. There were 2 boxes, one each produced sine and square waves, that was it. I built a little percussion machine out of, I think, Popular Science or something. Had a static mixer, unpowered, and a splicing bar. That was it. Oh, in order to have the pitches that I needed for the composition I was working on, I did about 1.5 octaves above and below middle C, maybe 2 octaves, recorded it on strips of tape, so that, and hung it on my office wall with, you know, this is C3, this is C sharp, so forth. So when I needed a pitch, I went to the wall and cut off the amount of duration I needed. Thank you. You're so warm, I appreciate that. Believe it or not, Mark's Music published 2 of the choral pieces with tape accompaniment. So that actually, you know, that little studio worked and produced some interesting things. At any rate, let's see. Oh yes, I worked with my shoes off, so that if a piece of tape fell on the floor, I would feel it before it was crushed and ruined beyond salvation. True. Okay. Now, so we've got a little studio, we got a little reputation going. The school is known for doing this. LBJ's Great Society provided the Moog 3C to the college. In late 60s, the federal government offered grant money to colleges and universities to improve and expand higher education. Charles Ball, professor of music education, chairman of the School of Music, wrote a successful grant that included a Moog 3C and 2 Ampex tape recorders that ran 7.5 and 15. We had the Moog with its own room, 2 Ampexes about a yard apart on a table, and built in. And we soon had the Moog in its own room, tape recorders, amps, and speakers. At last, I had a real electronic music studio. The 3C came only with schematics of the modules. Maybe that's still true today, I bet. At any rate, there was no way to know how to use it. There were no instructions, in other words, except the schematics. So let's see, where are we? So, okay. My memory of what was in that, it's probably faulty. There were 9 voltage-controlled oscillators. There were there was a high and low pass filter, which then combined correctly, you could have a band pass filter. And there was, and of course the filters have feedback. Well, it's just about what still is going on, of course. 3 voltage controlled amplifiers, mixers, I think a spring reverb, and a keyboard controller. And of course, I haven't mentioned this, but I am a keyboard player. and a kind of wire stick, I don't remember what it was called, where you could, a ribbon controller, yes, that's what it was. And so I could do pitch bands and those glides you heard and so forth using the ribbon controller. I've just mentioned this. Later I had my own mini Moog and micro Moog, but I started out at the top. I never did that much with those because, you know, if you've got all that power that the 3C had, you miss it. At any rate, to get to the doings, at any rate, Nashville's Peabody College, oh yeah, we started giving concerts of this, inviting people to send pieces for performers and tape. We had an annual concert series that we called Electronic Music Plus, which went on for 19 years at different institutions, a forerunner of Siemens's counts today, I think. At any rate, we were well known, at least in the Southeast, for electronic music composition, education, and performances. This is where the book actually started, because there were no books. I had to throw out sheets for the classes, and that's the book was developed in that manner. At any rate, one day, try to do this without reading it, because this is the crux of the matter. One day, Rick Powell, a recent graduate of the University of Florida, just arrived in Nashville, had come and had backers and wanted to build his own label, his own studio. He shows up at the electronic music studio at Peabody College, introduces himself and says, "Do you want to make a record?" Of course, no, yes. And I thought, he wants to record these concerts that we're doing. But of course that wasn't it. The plan was, he'll give me a list of country music tunes. I'm to go downtown, the Ernest Tubb record shop, still there today on Broadway in Nashville. Get 45s of those tunes, come back, notate, take off the lines off the records, and re-synthesize them, and make covers for all those tunes. So I set out on it, and of course it was a great challenge. I don't have perfect pitch, I wish I did. All my life I've tried to develop better relative pitch, which I'm sure all of you understand that, because a musician's ear is everything. At any rate, taking down the notation was a great challenge. Did that, then would synthesize, work. Learned that when you've got missed a very important point, didn't I? Rick Powell somehow borrowed an 8-channel, 1-inch Ampex 15 and 7.5 vacuum tube recorder. The thing was about this big, a square like that. And of course, in that room, as we worked with that recorder, those vacuum tubes would heat that place up, and those early transistors were not temperature compensated. So I worked in the wee hours, because of course you couldn't work during when school was in sessions. So I'm up there late at night working away on this album. And you lay down a track and think, oh, finally nailed it, finally nailed it. Play it back, it's out of tune, because the oscillators have shifted. Just a slight bit, but that's enough. So you do the track again, and in a way I think maybe it was all right, because I think I would have passed some tracks. You get better laying them down the more times you lay them down. So many tracks had many passes before it was completed. So let's see. Yeah, I'm just mentioning the whole project taught me a lot about musicianship. Ear training, get those lines off the records, re-synthesize, learning to listen to the spectrums, trying to adjust with the proper amount of filtering to get the color you want. And of course, the great power of Moog, the great invention of Moog, was the voltage control, so that you could do all of this and change the color in milliseconds. So at any rate, and it became, that experience, of course, became a great part of my professional life and professional development. I rigged a device for background pads, if I wanted a pad, that allowed me to switch at the push of a button multiple oscillators to give me either a major triad or a minor triad, so that I could put the pads in the background. But I didn't use many pads. Mostly with the 8 tracks, as you heard, and that one, I wrote counterpoint. Because of course I was a classically trained composer. I'd had all kinds of lessons in counterpoint. But when you lay them down in the tracks, play it back immediately, you realize the enormous power of counterpoint in musical composition, for whether it's pop, country, or classic. So later I wrote 2 counterpoint books which became published. Now, how does the book that Eric mentioned come into being? The records went out, and I'll tell you a bit about, well, at any rate, some of the promotion stuff that we did. Well, this is why I was going to read it. I'm losing it. You know, what was it? Oh, yes, the book. At any rate, through a series of circumstances in New York, people who knew people, the guy who had published the choral pieces told a publisher about it, and he called me and said, do you want to write a book on electronic music? Would you write a book on electronic music? So of course, I took those throughout sheets and began to expand them into chapters, which then became the book, and that published in 1973, which Eric has mentioned. Now, about promotion. Of course, I was taken around, Rick, as a producer, was setting me up to go talk to this radio station, that radio station around Nashville. It was a lot of fun. But the most fun one night was Ralph Emery. I don't know if you know that name, but that was a great power in country music in Nashville, Tennessee. WSM, 50,000 watts, clear channel. And Ralph had a late night program starting about 10, running until the wee hours, and different country music artists would come on to plug their records. Rick Powell, my producer, arranged for me to be on the Ralph Emery night show about 10 o'clock. So I show up about 10, but I don't remember the several stories, WSN building, but of course it was a TV station and everything else. It was all dark, there's nobody in there. Way, way away was this one room with Ralph Emery in it. So I finally get there about 10. He's got 2 turntables, this is a little room. Got 2 turntables, a gopher guy to go to the library to get his records, and he's got a bench on the other side of the room, only a few feet away from where he's working and announcing. It's a bench, it's not a chair. And the people that are talking, going to chat with Ralph, sit over there. The only people I remembered, and they came and went, of course, were the Wilburn brothers, but I remember them because they appeared to be drunk. Interestingly, when they were called up, they seemed to get very sober and did their promotions. People were either there promoting the record or promoting the road trip for the concerts that they were about to take off on. At any rate, 10 came and went, 11 came and went, and I hadn't been called up. So during a commercial, I go up to Ralph and I say, Ralph, you know, I came here at 10. When am I going to go on? Ralph says, Gil, I'm doing you a favor. After midnight, this signal, 50,000 watt clear channel, goes all the way to the Rockies. I want you to come on then, and I want you to explain to all those truck drivers out there who are listening what the Moog 3C is. He says, sit down. It's true. And of course I sat down. And a little after midnight he did call me up. And I knew I was going to, I was prepared. So Ralph says, Gil, I understand you're playing a brand new instrument. He says, how does it work? I says, Ralph, you start out with oscillators, mix a couple of these together, take them through mixers. Then you take them over the filter and you begin to adjust them so that you get the right form and spectrum. Then I said, you get to voltage control, Ralph said, wait a minute. He says, if I understand it, you could make a record so high that only dogs could hear it. I said, well, Ralph, yeah, I probably could, but there's not much need for that. And he, quick as a wink, says, I don't know, you could play it a lot around fire plugs. And with that, he released the record, and the Foggy Mountain Breakdown went from Nashville all the way to the Rockies. Well, maybe I can tell you this last story without reading it. How we doing? Yeah. It's time for the last story. Now this one, I hope you will believe because it is true. It is so strange that you may think I made it up, but I didn't. I lived this. One night, and by this time, I didn't tell you quickly, Athena Records for some reason went belly up in about 1974. I was the only records that they ever had that made the charts. I don't know if it was undercapitalized. I don't know if Stereo Dimension, the distributors, there's always stories about this, stiffed them, whatever happened, it was gone. And of course Rick Powell took a beating and all his backers went with him. It was terrible. The other thing was, Peabody College, small private college, enrollment was falling. School of Music was good, but all the other departments were getting smaller and smaller. Board of Trustees at both Vanderbilt, right across the street, and Peabody, are much the same people on both sides of the street. Board of Trust of Peabody votes to close the school, merge it with Vanderbilt. All the faculties are dismissed except education, and Peabody College becomes the School of Education of Vanderbilt University. But my day job was done. And I never had quit it. At any rate, I had to get another job. I went to West Virginia University, where among other things I taught 16th and 18th century counterpoint and published those books. But now to the story. One night I was in Morgantown, West Virginia by this time. I was watching the Johnny Carson show, and this guy came on the show, alleged that when you could thought correctly, you could get a response from a plant. And he sat next to Johnny, and they brought in a potted plant with a camera on it, and said, I'm thinking about hurting that plant. And the camera showed the needle. The leads were across the leaf, so that you were measuring the resistance of the leaf, which supposedly his thought was changing. I thought, whoa, if we can do this, we can lead that voltage, changing that voltage by the resistance of the leaf. When you take it into my mini Moog, and I will be the first man in the world to think a piece of music with the plant as my performer. I did it. I researched it a little bit. There's a book called The Secret Life of Plants. A nonsense book, it turns out, but I read it, and I somewhere found a circuit that you were supposed to build to do what this guy had done. Went down to the parts store, got the parts. I knew how to solder, put it together, borrowed my girlfriend's, not my wife now, but my girlfriend's begonia plant, hooked it all up, including my mini Moog, excitedly, and thought, I'm going to hurt this plant. What happened? Nothing. I thought, I'm going to slash that plant, etc., etc. No matter. Finally, I took to physically violating the plant. Nothing happened. However, I failed to mention a very important point. As a matter of fact, when you do this and hook it up, the plant does, the resistance on that leaf does change. And you get a just about at a breathing rate. And it goes on and on. Now, a lot of engineers in this room, you can build your own, see if you get the same effect, or if that was an anomaly, but I swear to you, it does go up and down. So it gives you the sense that it is living and breathing right there. I had already submitted for the Electronic Music Plus at East Carolina University, the annual performance of electronic music with performers and tape. Named the piece The Biological Loop, told them what I was going to do, and as the founder of the series, of course, they put me on. So, I'm getting close to the time for the concert, and what have I got? Nothing. Except a plant that's going, So I thought, I'll make it a piece of performance art. I will make a diary of everything from the time I heard it on the Johnny Carson show, building it, getting it, trying it, this, that, a whole diary of the thing, of what I've gone through to experiment with this. I will read this from a podium. I will have the plant hooked up to the mini Moog, micro Moog, down by my side. I will go on and I will read the diary of how this happened. So, you know, pack up everything, go down to East Carolina University, Greenville, North Carolina. I'm the last thing on an afternoon program. It's a series of programs. Fortunately, the last thing, I think. Stagehands put out my stuff, get everything ready. I walk out and I look at the audience and I get my glasses and, you know, put my yellow sheet down there and start reading. The micro Moog is going, People begin to titter. There was people trying to stop from laughing, trying to be courteous. That seemed to make it worse for them. And the merriment, the mirth in the room continued to rise, but people were trying to get along with whatever Gil was doing up there. I got about halfway through, and I got to the point where I was explaining that if you put the electrodes on different leaves, different stems, and above all, the trunk, you got different resistances. And that was what I was going to demonstrate. I leaned over towards the begonia and leaned down towards it, and the begonia shrieked. I kid you not, it shrieked. I was as surprised as anyone. I had never gotten a response from this damn thing, and that was... Isn't that unbelievable? But it happened. It really did. So I jumped back. And of course, the mini Moog returned to its As you can imagine, the audience came totally unglued. It's true. It happened. I had the good sense to realize now's a good time to get off the stage. I thanked the audience, so I don't think anybody could hear it anyway, and got off the audience. That was the last thing on the program. I don't think I got a curtain call, but anyway, it's of no importance. Afterwards, a lot of people came up, including, I didn't mention you, Bob Moog and Donald Buchler were both in the audience. Yeah, they were. They were both in the audience, so, you know, this is a big deal. And at any rate, of course, I knew Bob by that time. Bob, by the way, wrote the preface to the Electronic Principles and Practice book. At any rate, Bob asked if he could see the circuit. I think Bob figured Gil has rigged it some way. But I hadn't. I had played it fair, and Bob said he hadn't had so much fun since they put electrodes on Richard Teitelbaum's head. Now, Donald Buchler never said anything. I suspect perhaps his sympathies were with the begonia. At any rate, my friends, it really did happen. I returned the begonia to my girlfriend, now wife. The begonia slowly recovered, and we lived happily ever after.
Thank you, Gil. I believe that this concludes the banquet of the 7th iteration of the world's only synthesizer convention. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to mention, so we're doing an AMA tomorrow, 1 p.m. with Gil. Ask him questions, and I'll be there to moderate, and so I hope to see you then. Oh, it's on your badge too. So thank you very much.